Hey everyone, my name is Nick, and this is my $600 supercharged Mercedes. It's a manual C230K with 183,000 miles that I bought from Copart with a clean title. If you've been watching the channel, welcome back, and if you're new, let me get you caught up. Last time we got this started, but it is not running right. So let's find out if this is a pile of junk, or if I might just have a jewel on my hands. Welcome to episode 2 of Classic or Clunker. As a quick recap, last time we replaced the battery and the spark plugs to try to figure out what's going on with this engine. Even after that, we didn't see any improvements, and using the scanner, we didn't see any fault codes either, which didn't help. Here's what it sounds like right now. It's idling weird, and it falls on its face anytime we rev it. After a misguided attempt at trying to drive it, some thinking, and some research, we think it's likely that the catalytic converter destroyed itself, blocked the exhaust, and is now creating a ton of back pressure. This would mean it would be able to idle okay, but wouldn't be able to rev properly. So what can we do to figure out if that's what's going on here? On the header, there are two O2 sensors, one that's above the cat and one below it. So what we're going to do is remove the first one to give the exhaust a place to escape if the exhaust is actually blocked. If we can rev the engine higher than 2,000 RPM, which is where it chokes out right now, that'll be a good sign that we're on the right track. Now, even if this works, it's not a good idea to drive it, but it should be enough for us to get it into the garage so we can get it up on the lift. Then we can remove the exhaust after the header and take a look at the condition of the catalytic converter. So I have my offset O2 sensor wrench, which has a slot that allows us to slide it over the sensor and its harness. Make sure to get it on the sensor so that it won't slip. Once you attach your wrench to it, in my case it's a ratcheting wrench, I try to find the best angle to break the sensor loose. So I had to kind of brace myself to do this. But once I got it loose, I was able to unscrew it the rest of the way by hand. Keep in mind that the harness will twist while you unscrew it unless you unplug it from the car's harness. With the sensor out, I tried to tuck it away behind this heat shield to protect the harness from the hot gases that'll be there when we start the engine. With the sensor out, it's time to start it up again, so let's see what happens. So far it's definitely louder, which is normal, but it also looks like it's idling more smoothly. The engine is really steady. Take the oil filler cap off, we can see there's still a lot of pressure in the crankcase, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. It's also revving up way higher than before, which is a really good sign. It actually made it up to 4,000 RPM. Well, we're getting a lot of smoke because the PV blaster's burning off. But yeah, it was like running really smooth. And this is why we do research. Without looking into what might have been causing this, we wouldn't have known where to start looking, and it could have taken quite a while to even get to checking this. In fact, 2 owners ago, this car went to a Mr. Tire where they probably said they couldn't do anything. Then it actually went to a Mercedes dealership where the work wasn't done either. Now this isn't to knock a dealership, but it could have either been missed on a standard diagnosis, or someone decided the cost was too high and the repair wasn't done. Either way, the engine was seeing excessive back pressure, and on this engine, there's no sensor to detect that. It's possible that there were some codes about catalyst efficiency before it got to this point, but that was probably ignored. Now, we still have back pressure, because, we have blow-by. We have blow-by, but that could be caused by back pressure. And this is still going to be restricted, because it's a hole like this instead of...
It is restrictive, but I think I would be willing to bet that problem is sticky rings.
Because it hasn't been driven so long?
It hasn't been driven since at least February.
That's true.
So that may come around.
That's true. It could also be PCV, but...
It could be PCV. We genuinely do not know. But what we do know now...
is the exhaust is blocking up.
The exhaust is blocked. This engine runs...
good.
Okay.
Pretty good, yeah.
Coils are good. Spark plugs are good. We're not getting a misfire. This is a drivable vehicle.
Yeah, once the rear part of the exhaust.
Once we take the rear part of the exhaust off, we may have a problem with PCV still.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, the PCV system from FC Euro is like $20 with all the pipes. But I think you have to take off the airbox.
And that's fine. And in here,
there's a little bit of
there's a little bit of oil in the coolant,
but not like a little destroyed head gasket.
But here's the interesting thing. There's not coolant in the oil.
Yeah.
And our current theory is that because of the immense amount of back pressure that was causing this thing to misfire and even stall, the combustion gases couldn't get out. Which is why whenever we revved it, it would immediately fall on its face and stall.
And that's what
it was forcing oil past the rings, keeping that exhaust in there, and that is pushing it
through that, yes, potentially
into the channels.
Yeah.
And here's the biggest problem, and I will say that kind of damage, that kind of exhaust restriction, if you drive it for too long, you could blow your head gasket. So we could have a weak head gasket, it could blow a head gasket.
Yeah, it might be worth doing at some point.
It's probably going to be worth doing. We're going to need to do these camshaft magnets because that's just a thing that always fails. As you can see, they are leaking. There's O-rings to fix that.
Yeah.
But there is a significant chance that we'll have to do a head gasket at some point.
Maybe when we go in to do the Supercharged silencers and pulley.
Yeah.
And then you're taking off a bunch on the side, you might as well do it.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well do the whole PCV system and the breather hoses and everything, get that all done. But it starts, it runs.
So now let's get it into the garage. So I ended up, because I didn't disconnect the O2 sensor, I just zip tied it up here because the port's right here and I didn't want hot exhaust gases melting the wire. So I am under the C-Class and I've removed / broken the bolts that connect to the headers, which is where the first cat is. I have removed / broken the 2 bolts that hold the exhaust here. And then I'm going to actually remove the whole section, the whole rear part of the exhaust off the rubber holders to get it out. But so far it looks like there is nothing inside this cat anymore and it's all in here. Probably clogged up over here. So, yeah. This is the catalytic converter inside. You can see the bottom O2 sensor right here. And then that's the mesh. And between the O2 sensor and this mesh, there's supposed to be a bunch of honeycomb, which is gone. This is our catback exhaust stock. I removed it completely because this is quite rusty. It probably would have broken off, but it's just 3 hooks. Now, this is probably plugged up. So we're gonna pull it over. Do you want to do it? Where do you want to do it over? That way. Go. This is
Part of the primary cat, at least.
Yeah, you can see the mesh.
The honeycomb, and is it melted?
Not this one. This is melted. No. This is melted. It's a piece of... No, this is something else. It's soft. This is bits. So anyway, all this stuff is down that way. Some of it's soft, I don't know. But yeah. Unfortunately, this issue of disintegrating catalytic converters is not uncommon on the C-classes and some MLs in the early 2000s. Since the emissions system uses 2 O2 sensors around the cat in the header, we'll replace that one and we'll probably bypass this part of the exhaust. So now our options are either to find a used exhaust, get an aftermarket catback exhaust, which would be pretty expensive, or have some new piping made. Now let's see how it sounds with no restrictions.
Jesus, that is loud. Oh, boy.
So if you're going to start a car with open headers in the garage, maybe wear some earplugs, it's pretty loud. And now it's time to order some parts so we can replace the catalytic converter. And that's going to be the whole assembly of header and cat. So we're going to be removing the header. There's 4 bolts on the top and 4 bolts on the bottom. And on this car they're 11 millimeters. You'll also have to remove both O2 sensors. The bottom one is stuck, so I've disconnected it. It's on the other side of the engine on the bottom. The top one is removed and tucked away here. And then there's 1 bolt that broke that holds the bottom of the header after the cat onto a bracket that attaches to the engine. Right here is where the bolt broke off. I drilled it a little bit to help release it. This is the O2 sensor. It connects over here. I'm actually gonna remove it from here so that we remove the header, it'll come out, and we can use impact to remove the O2 sensor. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I've already removed the back of the exhaust. And yeah. The header mounts to the head with copper nuts on studs, but when we tried to remove the nuts, every single stud came out of the head. They're all in one piece, so we can't complain, I guess. If you're wondering where I am, I'm actually working from the underside of the car. The process of getting the header off ended up being a little tedious since we had to figure out how to maneuver the header, what was getting in the way, and what else needed to be removed.
It's jammed up on the heat shield up here, and the other heat shield, so it's jammed up on 2 heat shields.
Twist it.
Can I twist it?
That way? Yeah.
Yeah, but it won't. It's jammed up on the heat shield again.
Yeah, is that the one that you removed or partially removed? Fortunately, we did figure it out, so let's cut forward and talk about how we did it. To take the header out from the top, it's easier to do if you remove this heat shield. It's right above the header to protect a bunch of wiring and piping, and it's mounted with 3 E-socket bolts. One here, which mounts by the dipstick, and one under here towards the front. It was a little hard for us to remove it because this bolt was damaged, and we ended up having to hammer on an E-socket to get it off. If you can't get the heat shield off, you can still take the header out from the bottom, but it'll take a lot of fiddling with 2 people. You'll also have to remove the catalytic converter heat shield from here. You can see it caught here. Yeah.
It's a well-built piece. Unfortunately, the cats are made of glass.
Yeah, at least back then. So, as we said earlier, you have to remove the shield that goes over the exhaust manifold, but also this shield here, which is T20 Torx. There's 4 screws. So, 1 at the top right, if you're looking this way, and 1 a little lower towards the left, and a little lower on the right, and then all the way on the bottom left corner here. So remove that, and then the new one should come in to the top. And before we do anything, we'll also clean this up. So with the screws out, you can see it kind of wraps under the pump down there, but also the main issue is that there's a wire or a cable that runs inside here, and that's connected with zip ties, one here and one down there. So we'll have to probably cut those off so we can actually get this out of the way. This not gonna work otherwise. This here is the bracket that mounts to the back of the engine and the transmission using the transmission bolts that help support the bottom of the exhaust, or the manifold with the cat. So I actually ended up removing this because we removed the exhaust from the bottom. Well, it should probably come up from the top. Anyway, it was helpful to remove this for me because the bolt that was just like a captive nut here, or welded on nut right here, that was completely seized up. So the bolt snapped on this side, and then I had to actually grind this down. So I actually repainted it black. It's normally unpainted. This is just to get some protection by where the bolt was. But you wouldn't have to do this if your bolt comes out. Anyway, I will be reinstalling this under the car, so I'm going to show you. It's actually pretty straightforward. So this is the transmission, this is the oil pan, and this is a manual transmission, so it might be a little different on your car if you have an automatic. So there's one bolt hole here, one bolt hole here, and this is going to mount like this. You want it to be aimed downwards, and then also on mine there's the clip for the O2 sensor cable is on the bottom. So these mounting bolts are what's called E-Torques. Actually, I need to clean these. And there are two. Where are they? One here and one here. So they're like a reverse Torx kind of thing, like E-Torques. And this is E14 on my car. I'm gonna clean these up, put a tiny bit of blue Loctite on them, and then pop them in. Sprayed them with some brake clean, drying them off with paper towels. This is just so when I bolt them in, get them to the right torque. So if you put a lubricant on it, your torque won't be right, and stuff like that. So, blue Loctite again, in a red tube. A mystery. Okay, we're gonna put the part up here. Then I'll get the bolts started by hand. Screw them in with a ratchet. This might take a little while. The torque spec for these is 40 Newton meters. This is bracket reinstalled, which means we're ready to put the header on. It's got our gasket. This goes this way. That on the bottom left. The replacement header turned out to be a lot lighter than the original, probably because it's made of pipe segments instead of formed steel. It definitely makes it easier to handle. Here I just wanted to point out that I took the heat shield off the original catalytic converter and mounted it on the new one. How do you do this? Just put a table through? Can we go down there?
Just gotta careful, let's drop it. Look at that.
If you were able to remove the copper nuts from your exhaust studs, you can hang the exhaust gasket on the studs and then align the header on them as well. If the studs came out like they did for us, you can thread them in by hand one at a time. An extra set of hands is helpful to hold the header in place while you do that. These welds are sharp here.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the gaps between the exhaust ports on this new header mean we should be able to reach the lower studs more easily. During the process, I got back under the car to make sure the bottom of the header was aligned with the bracket.
One of the problems that we're having is that everything here, the welds are super sharp. Nothing has been sort of ground down, and there's all kinds of weld spatter everywhere. And say what you want about stuff that's built in China, but this horrifically welded, very expensive piece was made in Canada.
I thought it was made in the USA. The sticker.
And the sticker says made in the USA. So
Maybe the cat is made in the USA.
maybe the cat was made in the USA and the rest of it was made in Canada, but boy, whoever did this, was it Beer 30 on Friday? And then you have the nerve to charge $400 for that mess. Well, as long as it makes the car work.
Okay. Now with the, I have the bolt and the bracket at the bottom, right after the cat. These are all hand tight. Now it's time to torque it to 21 Newton meters, so it's light. But I'll start with cylinder 3, the top one. Okay, then I'll do cylinder 2, bottom. Then I'll do cylinder 2, the top. You can actually hear the gasket squishing down. Cylinder 4, top one. Cylinder 1, bottom, if I can reach it. Cylinder 1, top. And cylinder 4, bottom. Okay. That's the manifold torqued down. That's good. With the header mounted, we can start putting the heat shields back in place. The shield for the power steering pump needs new zip ties to hold the wiring. I marked the wire with tape where the original zip ties were so that I can put them back in the same place. Then with the wiring secure, we can screw the heat shield bolts back in. Now we have this one. So this one goes like this. There's this one goes right between the engine and the dipstick. This one goes to the bottom left of the header. And then this one lines up under this piping. So I think if we can okay, that's a challenge. Let's move it forward. And back. There we go. Okay. Perfect. One of the E-Torx bolts got damaged when we removed it, so I got a washer and an M6x1 bolt of the same length to replace it. In the event that I do have to take this back off, I don't have to worry about the head of the bolt stripping off. With the heat shield back in, we can put all the bolts in and finish attaching it. Now, normally you're going to have the whole exhaust or the middle section that you're going to reinstall here. However, since I have to replace part of the exhaust, I just have this little piece. And this is, let me see if you can see this, right here. This has the angle and it actually will connect with this onto this bracket. It mounts to the transmission. While I work on getting this piece of exhaust attached to the header, I'm using a jack stand to help hold it in place. I'm putting copper anti-seize on my new bolts to make it a little easier on myself if I have to remove them later on. Copper anti-seize will work at really high temperatures, which is why I'm using that rather than the silver stuff. As I tighten things down, there is some adjustability where the header joins this piece, so I have to make sure the alignment of the pipe is where I want it. Okay. So, these go to 20 Newton meters, so not a lot. But I'm tightening these based off the factory specs. I know they're not the same bolts, but it should be a good reference to get this mounted. Okay. Start. For this bracket, I'm using 2 M8 flange bolts, 2 washers, and 2 nuts. I'm doing this because the original mounting hardware snapped when I was removing the exhaust. Like on the other bracket, I'm using more copper anti-seize, and this time I'm going for good and tight. With all this mounted up, I'll reattach the rear part of the exhaust on the hangers, and then I'll move on to making the middle section myself. Finish the exhaust. I'm replacing this section, because this is all clogged up. And so I have 2 45s that I've cut down so that I can adjust the distance between this and this. And I've mocked it up and made some marks in permanent marker. I'm going to tack it together, that way I can test it. So this goes to the front of the car to step up from 2 1/4 to 2 1/2, because the rear part of the exhaust is 2 1/2, and the front part is 2 1/4 coming out of the headers and the cap. Yeah, I'm gonna do a couple taps on there. That way it'll be one piece, and I can test it out. And later on, this part will be clamped to the piece that comes right after the header, And then I have a straight piece that will extend to the rear part of the exhaust that will also be clamped over there, and so it will be 1, 2, 3 spots that need to be welded. Alright, so I'm gonna get to tacking this. Got a couple tacks here, there's 2 here, and then 1 up here. That should, that makes this one strong piece, well, comparatively strong piece that I can just test out like that. So, get back under the car and line it up again. This is the straight piece of pipe that's connected to the rear. Right now it's just slotted on, it'll get clamped on at the end. And up front here, if you can see, there's the part that comes off the header. I'm actually changing something here because I want to make sure I have enough overlap at the front and the rear. Slot this out. Mark where this is up here, and we'll mark this. So this section is front here, rear here. Got my tacked piece right here. So the goal is to slide this on far enough that it'll clear the back. Raise that up, and then slide it on the rear. Lines up. Here I'm checking to make sure it doesn't dip below the floor of the car. And since it looks good, we can move on to welding it up. If you're wondering why I'm putting my sleeve around the glove, it's because in the past I've had molten metal fall into the glove and burn my hand. Not really pleasant, I'll say. So I've done a bunch of measurements with the tacks in to see like how it positions it, make sure there's no sag. It's all about the same height off the ground. Once it's clamped in, there's enough overhang. There's overlap on both ends so that when I clamp down, it doesn't clamp on nothing. So it should be good to go. I'm gonna do a little section at a time. Here's what we have so far. Do little sections, one at a time. I'm gonna work all the way around, and we'll have one nice solid piece of exhaust. I'm going to take a little break to let it cool off, but I'll be back when it's all welded up. Just finished welding around all 3 portions, or all 3 joints. I'm going to run it with a wire brush, and then I'm going to probably prep the surface so I can paint it with high temp paint to make it look nice. Well, we'll see how it looks after the wire brush, but we'll get a nice finished look with the high temp paint I've got. Header paint, we'll see. It'll prevent it from rusting, hopefully. What they say, grinder and paint make the welder you ain't. But actually, I'm not mad at these. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good. I'm gonna probably knock that down a tiny bit. But everything else is actually not bad. So after grinding it down, and I ran the wire brush along the whole thing, this is what it looks like. Give it a coat of paint. Yeah. I actually took this section back off and prepped it with the wire brush as well, so that when the two are together, they look nicer. This will also get a coat of the same high temperature exhaust paint. I'm hanging both of the exhaust clamps over the parts of the exhaust, the head and behind. And the way I've designed the part that goes in here, it's going to slot, once it's in, slot it in a little further than it needs to be. I can rotate it and slide it over the rear part. I've made little marks every 1/2 inch on this pipe, and that will allow me to know when the front part is far enough on, because I know I need like at least probably 1.5 inches up front of overlap, and I already checked early, like previously, that will also mean the rear has enough. Now, because the diameter on this pipe is slightly smaller, there's a little gap with the part that's going to slide over it. I'm going to be putting a little bit of maximum temperature gasket maker, which is ultra copper. And right here, you can see I've marked 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, 2 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put gasket maker around here and then slide it back to right around the 1.5 inch mark. And this is specific to how this is built. So obviously, if you have a factory exhaust, you only have to worry about bolting that there and bolting a part in the rear. But you don't have that luxury. The reason I'm not putting it on the rear part is because it's actually a snug fit, so just the clamp should be plenty. Okay, it's there. Get my earplugs in. I'm gonna angle it this way. It gives us more clearance off the ground, but still good access. Let's see if I can make sure this is actually centered on the flame. Same thing on the rear. Once everything's tightened up, it's finally time for us to see how this car runs with the full exhaust. Now, our new battery is actually dead because we did start the car up a bunch of times without driving it, so that probably wore it down. So we got to jump back on it.
Is it on? Jump mode?
Okay, let's see.
There we go. That's right.
As you can see, the new header is smoking quite a bit. The heat is burning off manufacturing residue that's left on the metal. Definitely do your first startup in a well-ventilated area. Not really. Yeah, a little bit.
What is it?
Looks like dust.
Oh, dust?
Yeah.
Dust I can handle.
Yeah, it might be out of the muffler, remember? Things are sounding really good so far. As you can see, the exhaust tip is further out than it should be, so we'll have to adjust that later on. Since the engine is running, let's also see if the air conditioning works.
It smells. Oh, the smoke! Stop!
Yeah, oh, because it's right by the header. Maybe turn it off or get out.
Oh, that's in me now. Ooh,
Cold AC.
cold AC.
Very nice.
All right, that is good. Oh, smells like burning Canada.
What's that mean?
Well, it's made in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
I slid the back part of the exhaust onto the new section in. a little bit because I could, because it was poking out a little much. Looks a lot more factory. This section of pipe that was replaced on the car should contain part or most of the catalytic converter. So it's a lot of stuff. Wow. It's just like melted. It's like weird, soft catalytic converter material. There's the cat. So we have the engine running right. Now we can finally figure out what else is wrong. What do you think we need to do before we get this back out on the road? Let me know in the comments and subscribe to find out if it's actually a good car or if it's just a running pile of problems. If you enjoy watching me try to get cheap European cars back on the road, be sure to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.